Earlier on in this video series, I showed you how to create a simple covered jar with an inset lid that's just formed from a flat disc with a knob thrown right side up on the wheel. And those are great. They really serve a lot of good purposes, and they're a good introduction to making parts that fit together. Today I want to show you something that's maybe a little bit more challenging, but not really much. It's a ginger jar, and it has what's called a cap lid. And basically what that means is there's going to be a volume enclosed by the jar, but at the top of the jar, there's going to be a little vertical collar of clay, and we're going to make a lid that fits over the outside of it like a cap. And getting that fit just right is a fun challenge, and they're really nice forms to look at. You don't necessarily need to put a knob on them. You can just trim that top of the cap lid into a pleasing curve and be done with it. And it gives you a lot of nice surface to put some time and thought into your glazing. So I'm going to start by throwing the lid, and then I'll throw a jar to fit the lid. That's kind of a fun way to approach it. I've got 3.5 pounds of clay here, and I'm going to go ahead, so that it's all from the same block of clay, I'm going to tear off enough from my cap lid, and that's about maybe 3/4 pound of clay, and I'll set the rest of it aside. And we'll make the lid first. Really all it is a wide, shallow cylinder, and the walls of the cylinder will be the part that fits over the collar on the jar. I'm going to leave it a little bit thick in the bottom so that I've got some clay to remove to trim a nice curve into it. But I won't leave it excessively thick because I'm not trimming like a foot ring where I've got to hollow it out. I just need to have material to be able to put a nice curve on it. This is going to be a small ginger jar. You can make them quite big. They can be kind of a nice shape for a cookie jar. Spread that out a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and open down, leaving that thickness in the middle for trimming later. And I'll draw out compress this floor. You don't want your lid to crack, so it's good to go ahead and kind of compress it and smooth it out. And then I don't want to get this tall, but I need to have enough of a cap lid that it's going to fit securely over that collar on the jar itself. I'm going to get it to a thickness that I like, and then I'm going to assess whether it is too tall. It's bordering on too tall. If, just for the sake of instruction, I'm going to just say, yes, this is too tall. So bring out your handy friend, the needle tool, and you can take part of it off. It's the beauty of the wheel. It lets you do everything symmetrically and efficiently. And now I've got a height that for me feels a little bit more appropriate for a cap lid. It obviously depends on how tall you want your collar to be on the jar. Now, a word about how they fit. It's possible to have your cap lid resting with this surface that's now facing up, resting on the shoulder of the jar. But I think I actually prefer to have it where the vertical little neck on the jar rests against the inside of the lid, and that way I can have glaze all the way onto the shoulder of the jar. So what I want to do is create a really pretty distinct corner and make sure I've got a fairly flat area for the sort of rim of that little vertical neck to meet. You notice that I've got my jar angling outward a little bit, and that's a good thing. That's going to get me room for there to be glaze on both parts without worrying about it shifting in the loading into the kiln and getting stuck. I'll take it one step farther and use the square end of my wood knife, almost like a rib, to really define that dimension out there. Excellent. I'll just cut a little bit off the outside. That can obviously be taken care of when you trim it on the pot, but it's possible it won't need that much trimming, so might as well clean it up. Now I threw this on a bat, and it seems like a ridiculous thing to throw on a bat, but I didn't want it to lose its shape at all picking it up, and because it's so low, I was just nervous that I would get it out of round and I wouldn't be able to fit my lid to my neck as accurately as I would have liked. So I just lived it up and put it on a bat, and when it gets leather hard, I'll put it together and check it. I think I'm going to take one more pass with the chamois. I'm not loving the surface that's there. It doesn't have to be fancy. These are supposed to be fairly clean looking, I think. Just wanted it to be a little bit rounded. Now, I care about how big across this inside of the caplet is, because that's how big I want the neck, the outside of the neck of my jar to be. So I'm going to cross these calipers this way and drop them down into the inside here and figure out exactly how big across that is. And that is pretty much the setting that I need. So I am going to transfer this measurement with just a ballpoint pen to a piece of paper and then reset these calipers so they're measuring outside diameter at that same diameter. And that's going to give me a good way to tell when my jar neck is the right size to fit this lid. And I find it a lot easier to fit that diameter because I can always collar it in or expand it out until it's exactly this measurement. So I'm going to clean hands, set this aside, and come back and show you the jar. All right, I've got the rest of the ball of clay. It feels at least 2.5, maybe 3 pounds, somewhere in there. And this is going to be the body of the jar. I like these jars when they can kind of flow outward at the base, so I'm not going to make it too wide. I'll center it pretty nice and compactly. And I don't like to trim them, so I'm going to go ahead and open down to a 1/4 inch bottom thickness. Always like to check that. That was more like 3/16. So I'll push a little bit of clay back towards the center, and then I'll open out to the width that I want on the floor. I don't want it to be unstable, but I want it to be elegant and kind of starting out on a little bit of a narrow base. Now I'll go ahead and bring this up. And I'm gonna, even though this is gonna be kind of a big shouldered jar, I'm gonna bring it up as a cylinder. I'll give it more volume in a minute. Right now I just want to get the clay moved up off the wheel. Taking my time at the bottom, just drawing that clay up. I don't need to leave extra thickness like I would for a regular covered jar at the rim, because I'm not going to be splitting a rim to create a gallery. I'm just going to be making a little collar at the top that the cap lid fits over. So I don't want it to be flimsy, but I don't need to leave double thickness for making a connection between the two parts. I'll let this come out a little bit on the third pull. Go ahead and establish a little more volume. But then I'm going to let it come back in at the top. I know I'll have to collar this a little bit to get it to fit inside that cap. But that's the basic idea of the shape. And a lot of what we're going to do from here on out in this project is just the fine tuning and fiddling to get it all to work. So I'm drying out the inside right now. That's pretty important. And then I'm going to use ribs to get a lot of the extra gooey stuff off. Hopefully I didn't make that so small that I can't still get my hand inside. Going in slow and easy. Yeah, it's stretching the lip out a little bit, and I'll just have to put that back later. Now, before I get that shape blown out too far, I like to go ahead and use my wood knife and trim off any excess flare at the bottom that I don't really want in the finished pot. I find it's easier for my eye to sort of relate to the proportions and understand the curve if I do this before I put my final shaping into the pot. So even though I said I was going to go reverse the calipers, I forgot to do that before I got my hands gooey and turned on the camera. So I'm just going to get a rough idea of how much I need to collar that in. And it's a decent amount, but that's okay. I'll finish getting the shape just where I want it. And we're close, but I need to have a little bit broader shoulder, I think, for me to feel totally satisfied here. I feel like a cap lid looks goofy if it doesn't have enough of a broad shoulder. So I'm gonna get in here and really stretch, stretch, stretch. Almost lost grip on the rib. That's pretty disastrous when that happens. I'll just finish. Now, generally speaking, I like a real egg-shaped kind of profile. But I'm going to try to push this out a little bit more than I normally would and have it be a little bit more sort of, I don't know what the right term would be. Equally wide at the bottom, I guess, is at the top. And I think that's going to fit the idea of this cap lid a little bit better. And I'm going to go ahead and start collaring in the top. And I've got to be careful. Those proportions look pretty okay. I need to be careful that I've got enough height on this collar that, like I was talking about before, I don't want the rim of the cap lid to sit down on the shoulder of the jar. Just check that measurement again. This is not the correct way to do it. I should have it around the outside, but you won't tell, I hope. It's just a hair too big. So just bring it in just a little touch. And I'm also going to bring it up just a touch, just to make sure that it's going to sit the way I want it to sit. And I think the answer is, at this point, yes, it's going to sit just the way I want it to sit, which is this rim holding up the underside of that cap lid. Now I want to crisp up that corner where the shoulder meets what I call the collar here. This has a slight outward flow, but not quite as much as my cap lid, so I'm not really worried about that getting too tight as it goes down. That is something to pay attention to, though. And then I think I may have made it too small to go in and change anything. I think it wants a little bit more volume down there at the very bottom. Might be a good idea at this point to talk about using a throwing stick. Normally I wouldn't. If I was doing this for real, I would just stick my hand in there and collar it back in if I made it get wide. But I've had questions about, you know, what do you use these throwing sticks for? And this is the situation. You get them damp and you can go in where you can't reach with your hand, but you've got to anchor everything. You see, I've got my hand supporting my hand I'll go down there, and the trick is you can't really tell where you are on the profile until you start stretching. There I am at the bottom, and I've brought that out. And that is a really good example of a good use for a throwing stick, because all of a sudden I love that profile 100 times more than I did before I did that move. So you can order these, you can also make them. You can also just use a wooden spoon. A lot of times they'll work great as a throwing stick to get down into things. Don't feel like you've got to go out and spend a bunch of money on stuff. Maybe even starting from a wooden spoon that you get from the thrift store, and you can modify it. Nobody says you have to leave it as it was, just a piece of sandpaper and some ingenuity, and you can reshape things to meet your needs. So I'm going to take the chamois and round out this lip just a touch. And that's just the reason for that is I want it to be unchippable, or at least chip resistant. And I'm happy with that jar. It's got a little bit of life left in it. There's still some throwing marks and some rib marks. It's got a little bit of jazz, but it's a pretty tight form, pretty symmetrical. I think that's going to work well. I've got my hands clean. I'm going to grab the torch, and I'm going to show you how to do the final fitting and the trimming of that lid. And normally I would just wait, let this stuff get to leather hard, but I want to go ahead and get this done so you can see all these steps and I can get this video out on time. So I will come back with a torch and show you how to do the final manipulation. I've used the torch a little bit on both this cap lid and the jar itself, and I want to show you how I'm going to use the fact that these are both on bats to sort of check my fit, and it's just a convenient way to do this if you've got the bats handy. I'm going to go ahead and replace the jar on the wheel, and I'm going to take this bat, and I haven't wired that off, I don't think. Actually, it looks like I maybe did wire it off. Let's see if it's going to drop. No, it's staying on. So I can just kind of check that fit. And I like the way it fit. It almost felt like it had to suction on down there. So that felt pretty good. Now, it's hard to tell when you've got the whole bat on there, but for that initial check, that's a good way to do it. So what I'm going to do is run my wire again under this lid. Yeah, actually I remember I had wired it off. I got lucky it didn't drop off on me. I'm going to just carefully pick it up by the edge and set it on. And if I don't like the way it fits, like if it's just way too loose, I can stretch that thing open a little bit more. Or if it's too tight, I can collar the jar down a little bit. But it is feeling actually pretty darn near perfect. And you can see there's a little gap between the rim of this cap lid and the shoulder, and that's exactly what I want. So this is looking like it's fitting together pretty well, and it's a good enough fit that I think I can just go ahead and trim this top. Now, this is a project that doing it instantaneously with the torch is fraught. I want to do it this way just so you can see, but this bottom clay here is really gooey and soft. And I think in testing it, I also knocked the center of the jar off a little bit. I'll try to push it back. That seems better. All right, so I'm going to get in here and just try to round this out a little bit. I don't want to remove much from the middle because I remember the center is a little on the thin side. You want to just keep taking all your trimmings off. Sometimes when you trim that, it'll put a nice swirl on there that can be an attractive part of the finished product. Other times you may want to come back with a rib and just clean it up. Now the cap lid idea really only works up to about 4 inches in diameter, because you need to be able to grab that lid with your hand and take it off. And that's going to vary, of course, from person to person. But for me, the rule of thumb is 4 inches or smaller. This cap lid works great. You don't need a knob on there. And just makes a kind of a nice, crisp design. And I could come back when this is leather hard and finalize this trim job instead of fighting with these sticky trimmings, but I like being able to say, okay, it's done. I'm gonna tap the center, and I know that center is quite thin, so I'm gonna lay off trimming the center anymore. But the outside edge I can take down a little bit, and that's gonna make the proportions look a little bit better. Even if I round it out a little bit, that's going to help visually for that cap to look a little bit less tall. I'm really trying to focus on taking a thin trimming at all times. It's real easy to get in there and get a little heavy-handed and end up catching your trim tool and sending everything off center. All right, I'm liking that. I'm gonna take my finger and just kind of burnish that outside corner a little bit. I think I'll leave the trimming lines. You can come back with a rib, but I sort of like the way that's looking at the moment. It doesn't look too different from the throwing lines that I've got in the base. So let's just make sure that lid comes back off, and it does. And it feels a nice weight, and it just fits. Once it drops down, initially there's plenty of play in it, but when it drops into position, because of the way I measured that, it just sits perfectly still, and it's not going to rattle around. And that's kind of our ideal situation. So I call that a ginger jar. We can just call it a jar with a cap lid, and they're awfully fun, and it's maybe a way that you haven't tried making a lid before. And if that's the case, I'd say give it a try this week. It's a fun way to do it, and it makes a really nice product.